Now I'm going to continue where we left off yesterday. And where did we leave off yesterday? We're talking about the journeys in the desert that the Jewish people made. And they made 42 journeys. 42 journeys is 7 times 6. And why do we have, where do we get these numbers from? Because this corresponds to our personality, how we react to the world. That's called the emotions, the midot, in the language of Hebrew. Midot means our measures, but it means our emotions. In other words, how we react to the world, what we love, what we fear, where we put our energy, our goal, our victory, our surrender. So the Rebbe explained to us how we can do all these things with God. And that's the whole idea of why we're alive, why we're in the world. What are we here for? Every moment is a challenge. Every moment we should be making decisions. Sometimes you can make the decisions, early. You decide you're not going to steal. So there's not so much of a temptation if, go into a store and the owner leaves the cash register open or something, or somebody's wallet falls in his pocket. So you've already made a firm decision in your heart, you're not going to steal. That decision, that's what we call netzach. That's what we call netzach. Or someone comes and offers you a bribe and says, I'll give you money to do this, but you don't love money. You love the truth. That's called ahava, love. That's chesed. Or gavura, let's make a revolution. Let's make oppose this thing. It's going to be good for you. But you look at it and you say, no, it's not. It might be that I'll benefit from it, but it's not according to the Torah. It's not according to the Torah. Let's pass a law in the Knesset that it's okay for planes to fly on Shabbos, and then we'll give another $20 million to your yeshiva. So it could be that we'll benefit from it. Okay, Tov. So therefore, all of your a lot of decisions you make deep inside of yourself. It's already, decided. But a lot of times you have things happen in the world that really just touch on something in your natural human soul that make you forget about all of your principles and all of this. And that's the battle. That's the battle. That's going through the desert. The world is a big desert, and there's a tremendous battle of things that lure us and convince us and make us feel depressed and make us feel confused and give us they inspire us, and they're wrong. There are things that are wrong. And so we have to go through the desert and pick out desert of this world. And we have to, first of all, that's intellectually, pick out what are the things that we're supposed to love. How do we express our love for God and our fear for God and our desire for God and our feeling of connection with God, and how do we express it in the world? Right? And the world is very challenging and very tempting and very confusing. So that's what's called going through the desert of life. And the idea is not just to get through it. That's the whole point of this mimer. It's not just to get through life unscathed and ignore the world. The whole point is that we're supposed to transform it. We're supposed to transform the world. God puts these situations in front of us so that we can change them to blessings. Right? We're presented with a challenge, with something that scares us, with something that lures us, and we don't get scared and we don't get lured, and so if nothing else, we make a good example for others. But that's psychologically. The fact is when you do what God wants spiritually, even though nobody might see it, it changes the whole world. Like we talked about this before. How many, I know, millions of Jews died at the hands of the non-Jews because they refused to give up their principles, or because they were Jews or whatever, and nobody even knows about it. No one even knows about it. Right? How many Jews died in Auschwitz and Treblinka and these places with Shema Yisrael on their lips? And no one even knows that they still held on to Any normal person would say, we obviously, what's the point of this religion? You get burning, you're getting gassed, because you're Jewish. You should leave it. That's the world screaming out, forget God. And they said Shema, and nobody even knows about it. But that's somehow them we'll see. I mean, I don't know when we're going to see. I can't, I don't know how long this is going to go on. But nevertheless, we are promised. That's Jewish faith. What can you do? That we are going to see that all of this self-sacrifice, etc., and the journeys that we took really mean something. But that's only when we reach the goal, and the goal is going to be when Moshiach comes. Okay. Now we talked about this yesterday. Why is it that the journeys were only 42? In other words, they only had to purify 6 of the emotions, the seven aspects of 6 of the emotions. There are 7 emotions altogether. That's why every emotion, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchut, every emotion has 7 aspects of it. The same thing. Chesed of Chesed, Gevurah of Chesed, Tiferet of it. It says, because here we have, why only 7 times 6? Why not 7 times 7? Why not refine all the emotions? That's what we do in Sfirat Omer. So it said Sfirat Omer, counting the Omer is different. Sfirat Omer, what we do, first of all, it's a commandment. And because it's a commandment, so we draw godliness down into the world. And this whole thing of the journeys is we're going up to God. We're elevating the world. We're dealing with the world in the way that God wants. We're reacting to the world. And in the Sfirat Omer, we're just dealing with God and pulling godliness into the world. So we started this yesterday, so let's do it again. Because there's some good advice over here. Hine, behold, mimata l'mayla, from mimayla l'mata, from above to below. From above to below, that's in the counting of the Omer. We draw down godliness. Hey, memtet, there's 49. Why 49? Because we refine all of the 7 emotions. We're drawing godliness down. God is above, right? God creates everything. So God is, so to speak, above. So we draw godliness into all 7 of the emotions. So therefore, it's 7, and each emotion contains 7 aspects. So that's 7 times 7 is 49. Kamo b'sfirat omer, like in Sfirat Omer, shemamshichim, we draw down makifim, these surrounding powers of godliness. Is anybody here? No. These surrounding powers of godliness. Just bigger a little bit. There we go. 1 second. The surrounding powers of godliness we draw down. Whatever. Here we go. We draw down godliness, and godliness is, of course, above everything. So we draw down milmayl lamata. Therefore, the 7 emotions, the upper 7 emotions of God, hayom yom, each one is called another day, so to speak, another revelation of godliness in the world. Call pratam, and all the 7 aspects in these 7 emotions. Hainu gam bechinas malchut, even the level of malchut shebachol mida, which is in every single one of the emotions. L'chashem amamlacha bechinas yesh v'gilui are revealed in the world. So that all the 7 aspects of God and all of their 7 facets come into the 7 facets, spiritual facets of the world, the emotions. Like it says, lanchil o yesh. So therefore, it draws down even the lowest, the lowest aspect of God, Malchut, into the world, which is not the case. Not the case. Has Mesiot, the journeys in the desert, they're from below to above. Einam kiim shisha, they're only 6. B'chol mida, in each and every emotion. Why? Kitzorach liot bechinas ayin, because the lowest of all these emotions you have to negate. What's the lowest of all the emotions? Malchut. Malchut is how you are in the world. So that's, so to speak, you're not refining. Or how are you refining it? By negating it. V'lo b'chinas yesh. Lahargish midotav, to feel yourself. Kol Moshe Omer Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, Eini Yodea is a derech molichim oti. Okay, here's a bizarre story about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. The Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he was like the leader of his generation. He was like he began the whole Talmud after the destruction of the temple. He was present in Yerushalayim at the time of the destruction of the temple, and he was taken out, smuggled out, and he saved all of the Torah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Yavne v'Chachameha. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, when he was on his deathbed, so his pupils would go gathered around, and he was a tremendous inspiration for everybody. So they said, Rabbi, you're leaving this world. Leave us with some words of inspiration to hold us on when you're not here. So he said that you should fear God like you fear people. First of all, he said, yeah, okay, that's what he said. First, you should fear God like you fear people. And they said, that's all? And he said, you should know that before a person does a sin, he says, I hope nobody's watching me. In other words, the fear, what people think about me, what people know about me, that's a very, 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 very deep thing in the essence of the personality. Very good. Okay. Then he said, Eini Yodea is a derech molichin oti. I don't know, I'm about to die, I don't know where I'm going to go. If I'm going to go to heaven or if I'm going to go to hell. This is a very deep message in a lot of ways, but okay. Am I going to go to heaven or am I going to go to hell? Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he was, we can only dream, if you're a religious Jew, to get anywhere near, even to the bottoms of the shoes of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's devotion and joy and love and awe of God and his learning of Torah, his constant learning of Torah and feeling that the Torah is the wisdom of God. And he said, I don't know, maybe I'm going to go to hell. Maybe I'm going to go to hell, maybe I'm going to go to heaven. I don't know which way I'm going to go. So that's not too much of an inspiration for people like us. I mean, he should have said, see you in heaven, guys. Hope you get to my level. You're going to go to heaven. He said, no, it could be I'm going to go to hell. Okay, first of all, what type of an inspiration is this for his pupils? And second of all, how could he say a thing like that? I mean, what was he mean? He was playing games with them? What? I mean, he was just about to die. And those times you don't, I mean, I don't know, at least maybe I have been previous incarnations, but I don't remember what it's like. But at those moments, you're pretty serious. A person's pretty serious. So how could he be saying, I don't know if I'm going to go to heaven or hell? And so they explain that what it means, there's a lot of explanations to this. A lot of explanations. One of the explanations is that he was afraid that he didn't live up to his potential. He had a tremendous potential, and he was worried maybe I didn't live up to that potential, and because of that, so I'll get punished. One explanation. Another explanation is that we don't know how God judges things. It could have been that he did one little tiny bad thing, and that bad thing, because of his level, is equal or outweighs all the good things that he did. Could be. But there's a deeper way of looking at it, even deeper, and that is he didn't really know what his motivations were. It could be that his motivations for serving God were because he liked it. And he got a lot of attention. He was the highest of, people, and that was his, his thing. He was just being like the suffering artist and the absent-minded professor. He was just the suffering Talmudist. He didn't know what, maybe his motivations were just egotistical. If he would be good at stealing, so he would be a thief, but he just wasn't good at any of those things. He was just good at learning Torah. That's another explanation. In other words, the deep essence of his soul didn't really know where he was really at. Okay, all those explanations are good. First of all, this is a big lesson for us. And namely what? Don't think about going to heaven. Don't think about hell. That should not be your consideration. Even though we certainly know what's good and what's bad. There's no doubt about it. But if you're thinking about that all the time, it makes you selfish. And the purpose of Judaism is, the big novelty of Judaism is that it's possible not to be selfish, not to think about heaven, not to think about hell, to think only about what God wants. And am I going to go to heaven or hell? If I go to hell, maybe I'll be with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Who knows? Maybe, yeah, who knows where he is? He said he didn't know. But that's not the point he wants to learn over here. The point that he wants to learn over here is, he said, Any day, I don't know which I'm going. Hainu lefi shelo yada, he didn't know, velo hirgish. He didn't really feel his love and his fear. What he wants to stress over here is the aspect of malchut, which malchut is the lowest aspect, namely me, what I am. Right? That's the bottom line. Huh? Me, who I am. As who am I? What am I? As Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai didn't feel that. He knew that in order to really serve God, that you have to not think about yourself. You have to not think, you get hungry, so you eat. You have a house, there's things you have to do according to the Torah. You have to dress nice, you have to put on clothes, you have to do this, you have to have a job, you have to have money. But all those things he didn't do for himself. He did it because that's what it says in the Torah to do, and he did it. It could be he did it, and he really loved his wife and he loved his children. He was honest in business, and it could be he was a good businessman. Could be, could be. But he did it all only because that's what God wanted. He didn't feel himself at all. And even more, he was thought, listen, I never made calculation. That's another explanation that they say, that his whole life he was busy. And so he was busy serving God. So he never really made any sort of a reckoning, my good deeds against my bad deeds and my this. So now he was on his deathbed and there was nothing more that he could do. So at the last moment he said, no, maybe I should, make an end of the year, how do you say, inventory, what's going on, the end of my life inventory. And he thought about it and he said, wow, maybe it's not going so good. Especially he said, listen, I don't see any bad things, but there must be bad things. Must be something bad. It could be that I'm just missing a whole area of, whatever his explanation is. The fact is he was totally, so to speak, surrendered to the truth, and he didn't make any reckoning about himself. He said, what are we learning about that for? That's the aspect of malchut. That's the bottom line. The bottom line is if you want to really fix up yourself, and that's what we're talking about, going through the desert, is you have to not think about your own self as far as who am I and what am I and how am I. And if that's it, you just have to think about, I'm serving God, I'm doing my job, etc. There's a story, I heard this story is true, that there was I heard that it really happened, that there was a golf match for the what is it? I don't know. Anyway, the champion of the world golf, whatever it was. And one of the contestants went to another one, and he said to him, he sort of tried to strike up a conversation with him, or maybe it was before that match began. And he said, when I do my backswing, as I breathe in a little bit and I hold it, what do you do when you make your backswing? He just said it to him, right? So I never thought about it. Well, that's what he wanted. He wanted this other person to start thinking about it. As soon as he started thinking about what do I do when I make that backswing? When I do it, do I breathe in? Do I breathe out? Do I breathe out twice? What I do? As soon as he started thinking about himself, then that wrecked his whole thing. He was supposed to be thinking about the game, about the success, about putting that ball into that hole, right? That's what he was supposed to be thinking about. As soon as he started thinking about anything a little bit extraneous to that, and that wrecked up the whole thing. That's the same thing with serving God. You have to think about the goal, what God is. So therefore, what does it mean? You have to negate, so to speak, yourself. That's why we only refine 6 of the 7 emotions. We negate the lowest one. Well, so to speak, we don't refine it. That's like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said. I don't know if I'm a big tzaddik, if I'm not. He never made a calculation. He didn't feel any of this accomplishment and the accomplishments that he had. The bottom line, his malchut, his lowest aspect, he didn't feel anything that was there. So therefore, that's, so to speak, not being elevated. He didn't elevate it into any of these other aspects of loving God and fearing God. And He negated it. That's how we find from below to above Malchut. These journeys, there had to be Masor. And now, there had to be also Aaron. Aaron, Moses traveled with them. Right? Al Pi Moshe, it says Moshe, because Moses was helping them to feel godliness, because Aaron is the whole thing of Nira. We talked about this before. Ahar, Nira. Shehu Bechinas Gila, this is a revelation from the concealment. The he, Bechinas Aaron, this is the level of Aaron, revealing godliness from above to below. Like the Kohanim. Usually Aaron is called the escort of the queen. In other words, he elevates the Jews from below to above. But here we're saying Aaron gives inspiration. We talked about this in the Devar Malchut. Aleph is the highest level of God. Nun shows how it's drawn down very low. And Har is love. Remember, we talked about that in the Devar Malchut. Kamosh Ketuv, like it says about Aaron at the Nerot. That's how Aaron lifted up. He lit up the candles. Aaron at the Nerot. He doesn't say that he just lit them, but halot means that he elevated them. And who are these candles? These are the souls of the Jews. Like it says, Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam. And that's the whole thing of these 42 journeys, going from below to above. And Aaron, who are Malet and Nerot, Aaron elevated, lifted up these candles. He brought inspiration to the Jews. He aroused the love of the Jews to God. El Mul Panei Menorah, he lit the candles facing the middle of the menorah, right? The menorah had three going out here, and one in the middle, so they were all, the lights were facing the middle one. That there should be Ner Havaya Nishmat Adam, that there should be revelation in all of the Jewish souls. This level of the light of God is the soul of man. In other words, that's what it's called. That Aaron is called the Shushvina de Matronisa. He's called the escort of the queen. Moses' thing was to show the Jewish people how small they are and how big God is. And Aaron's thing was to show the Jewish people how important they are to God, to elevate them. Therefore, he's called the Masod on the name of Aaron. Therefore, the journeys are called Al Pi Aaron. Shehu Echad Mishiva Roim, that Aaron was one of the 7 shepherds. Moses was also one, but he was one of the Hamafarnasim L'Neshamas Yisrael. He was one of the 7 shepherds of the Jewish people. It's the same people as when in Sukkot they have the Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and David and Shlomo, and Moshe and Aaron. Some people say David and Yosef. Moshe. Mafarnasim L'Neshamas Yisrael. Bagam also Kohen Gadol, also the high priest. Asher Mibanav, that from his sons, Yesh, there is Bo Bechinas, this level of raising the Jewish people up from below. Shushvina de Matronisa, the escort of the queen. The Jewish people were the queen. Like God is the king. Okay, so what do we have? We have, in our generation, we have the Rebbe. The Rebbe is also Moses, and he's also Aaron. The job of the Rebbe is like Moses, to show us how big God is. That's the ideas of Chassidut. But also to show how important we are to God. And that elevates us, inspires us. And that's the inspiration, is that we make these 42 journeys in the desert, in the desert of this world, and we elevate ourselves and the world. As the world becomes closer to the truth. This is what's called running from below to above. That's what we say in Kriya Shema. Asher Parsha Shema, there are 42 letters from Ve'ahavta. If you count over there, right? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and Baruch Shem Kavod B'Chol, and then you say the next paragraph. That's a paragraph in the Torah, right? Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha. Count them. 42 words from Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha until Uvisharecha. Kamosh Ketuv, like it says in a mimer, Menorah Sal. Then afterwards, that's going up to God. But afterwards, the thing is, we have to come back down. How do we come back down into the world? That's the 18, 19 blessings of Shmona Esrei. Shmona Esrei. It's called 18 blessings. And we talked about this before. The rabbis added on a 19th blessing against the church. That was later on. Bechinas Shmona Esrei. She'achar Kriya Shema, which is after Kriya Shema. So Kriya Shema is going up to God. Thinking about God, Shema means to think, and to lift yourself up a little bit from the world. But then that's not enough to be elevated from the world, and if the world doesn't have any effect on you, that's step number one. Step number two is that we have to, yes, have an effect on the world, and that's the blessings that we ask for God in the Shemona Esrei. Only Baruch Atah, we say, blessed are you, God. Baruch means bricha. Baruch means like a pool of water. Sheyumshach, that it's drawn down. He's borech, I'm sorry, yuvrach, that it was drawn down, the yumshach, and another word for it was gathered together, liyot bebechinas giloi, to be revealed. Bechinas achas, bechinas ata. Baruch means to be drawn down. Ata means second person, you. Shula nochach, that means face to face. That's what we're asking for God. We're asking for God, that's the Shemona Esrei. We're asking for God to please be revealed in the world. That was the whole thing of the journeys. That was the encampments. I'm sorry, in the desert. The Jewish people traveled. That's the journeys. And when they made these journeys, they took the ark with them, and that purified the desert. They traveled from one place to another in the desert, but they also made encampments in the desert. And there's other Maimorim where he asked the question, why do we call this weekly Torah portion Mas'eh, the journeys of the Jews? Because they made 42 journeys. So, but that's not the main thing of the journeys. They made the journeys. The journeys were just like a means by which they could make the encampments. The encampments, that was the main thing. In fact, if you look at the Torah portion, we just read this yesterday in Chitat, if you do Chitat, the Torah portion. So the 42 journeys are called by the names of the places where they camped. The journeys didn't have any names. It says they went from Alush, they went to Risma, they went from Risma, they went to Yat Vasa, they went from Yat Vasa, they went to the Torah, they went to Star, they went to the places where they camped. There were 42 camps. Why is this week's Torah portion called Mas'eh, journeys? It should be called Chaniot. We'll see that in a moment. Anyway, the answer that's usually given is that it's true that the Chaniot were a very important thing, but the main thing in life is to keep moving. And until they reached the land of Israel, the encampments that they made were not the main thing. The main thing was that they were moving toward their goal, and their goal was coming to the land of Israel. And the encampments that they made, that was a step. Right? Like we said, every step is important. That's what it says. Yomar, when the ark, when that was the tablets, when it stopped, it was a Shuva Hashem Alfei Rovavos Yisrael. It says, come back. Come back. What does it mean? That the main purpose of these journeys was to go out of Egypt from a Meitzar and a limits. Shafilu Gan Eden Elyon, even the upper heaven, is also called Egypt, Meitzar, because it's understandable. That's, by the way, a thing, if somebody says to you, there's these big philosophers and big scientists, and they say God is ridiculous, it's superstition, God doesn't exist. So the answer to that is that you're right. God does not exist in any normal way. God creates all existence, and God creates understanding also. And the only way you can understand, you can comprehend, if you want to call it, attach yourself to God, is you have to use your understanding. But God is above understanding. God is above understanding. In fact, if you're caught in the world of understanding, if you think that understand, then you're in Egypt. That's Egypt. Egypt means I have to understand. I've got to be the boss. I have to understand. It says this is the level of Meitzor or Gavul. Even if you understand the biggest understandings, understand that's, by the way, why it's possible. I mean, a person like Yeravam ben Nevat, or even more, all the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, They did the same thing. They had tremendous understanding of God. They saw God. They had the experience of being taken out of Egypt with the plagues, and they heard God. They saw God at Mount Sinai. It says face to face. When it was happening, it was real. But as soon as it wasn't happening anymore, then it was just in their memory and their understanding. And as soon as that happens, then they're the boss. And that's why it's possible for them to worship idols. It was possible to worship the golden calf. Because as soon as there wasn't the immediate experience, which experience itself is something which can't be understood. After you have the experience, then you evaluate. Then you evaluate. And therefore, call them in based on soils. Therefore, all the 42 journeys are called a call Asher Yatsum Eretz Yisrael. They're all called going out of Egypt. Even though the first journey was the only one that went out of Egypt, they went out from until what is the Ramses or something. They went to that's when going out of Egypt from what is Piachiros or something to Ramses. That was the first journey that they left Egypt was one, and then after that they were out of Egypt. They were going toward Israel, but they were out of Egypt. Says no, it's not so. All the 42 journeys are called going out of Egypt. Why? Because even though that they were already physically out of Egypt, but spiritually they weren't out of Egypt until they reached Israel. And when they reached Israel, then they had the chance to really be connected to what's above understanding. And all the time they were in the desert, some or other this understanding played a big part in their lives. That's why they refused to go into the land of Israel, right? The spies. That's why they went after Korach. That's why they were always complaining, because everything was according to the understanding. It says, therefore, the going out of Egypt, until they encamped in Yarden Yerecho. That was the last encampment right before they went over the Jordan River. Yerecho, that's the reach, that's smell. Yarden Yerecho, smell. Hine beginas reach, who haora muetas. It's a reach, a smell is a very small. How do you say the small sign, perception. Me'atzmi is the double from the essence of the thing. Like it says, reach apecha katapuchim in the Song of Songs. Shereach inu memehut hatapuach atzmo. You smell an apple. The smell of an apple is just a little sort of a wisp of the reality of the apple. That's your reach. Also, the same thing about reach. It says smell. It says by the garments of Yaakov when he came into his father Yitzchak to get a blessing. He says the smell of your garments is like the smell of heaven. He said, "Reach begadav." And he blessed him. And then after he smelled, Yitzchak smelled the smell of the garments. The garments, he said, were the garments of Adam, whatever, the first man. He smelled these garments. Then Yitzchak gave him a big blessing. And in fact, it's the biggest blessing in the whole Torah. That God will give you from the dew of the heavens and etc. That's what it says. Berecha de lavushecho. It says there's a story in the Zohar that the great holy men of the Zohar, they met up with this other man, and they said, from the smell of your garments, we see that you didn't say Kriya Shema today. He begadim, the garments, in this case, they are the commandments. They are the commandments. Look in the what is it? The 4th chapter of the Tanya. She'em bechinas makifim. 3rd chapter, 4th. I'm sorry. 4th chapter and the 5th chapter. Shemakifim. She'em bechinas ratzon. That this is the upper will of God, which is above wisdom. Vasaga. Varaita and the Torah comes from God's wisdom. The Torah that has understanding to it. But the commandments, that's the garments, that's above understanding. And therefore, the garments, that's called, from the commandments, we can get a little bit of a smell of what God is. It says, Lochin, therefore, Nehanim Miziva Shechina. Therefore, it says that after a person dies and goes to heaven, as the commandments become like a garment, and from this garment, you can get pleasure from the ray of the Shekhinah. That's Yarden Yerecho. The Jewish people reached Yarden Yerecho, that was the last campment that they made. Yarden Yerecho means that they began to appreciate really what the commandments are, the essence of God. But the upper essence will of God, which is above wisdom, you can't possibly grasp. You can get a little bit of a smell. Loch, and therefore the rabbi said, Yafa Shachas B'tshuva Maisim Tovim. Therefore the rabbi said it's better to have one moment with good deeds in this world than all of the life in the world to come. Why? Because the world to come is just the reward of the commandments. You get a little wisp of the godliness in the commandments, but really the real reward of a commandment is the commandment itself. Namely, that I am doing what God's will is. That's Yarden Yerecho, that they got a little reach, a little smell of what's waiting for them in the land of Israel doing the commandments. The commandment itself, Shalom, this is totally above any levels of heaven, etc. And therefore, Kativa says, Vayerach et reach begadav. Therefore, it says that Yitzchak smelled the garments, the smell of the garments of Jacob. And it was the commandments that he did. He could appreciate a little bit the smell of the godliness of the commandments, but the essence of the commandment is above understanding. It's not relevant to understanding. The Yitem Lecha will be given to you, Shebebechinas Reach, that this smell, Nimshach, will be drawn a big blessing. Mitala Shamayim, from the dew of the heaven, which is the Torah, the written Torah, Mishmenei Ha'oretz. These are the blessings that Yitzchak gave to Yaakov. From the heavens, the Mishmenei Ha'oretz, this is the oral Torah. The Shorshim, the source, comes from this Reach Begadav. It comes from the smell of the garments. In other words, this surrounding level, Makivim. It's known that a person faints, you can give him smelling salts and he comes, right? You can call his name, you can shake him, nothing happens. But smelling salts reaches somehow or other to the essence of his soul, wakes him up. There's the same thing with the commandments. The commandments are above understanding, but you can get a little tiny, if you're really, blessed, you can get a little smell of the godliness. It's called the smell, because it's basically not understandable, but it still comes into you. Also, the Moshiach is going to judge by his smell. And it says he'll also be judged by his smell. The wise men will see by their smell. This is above understanding. Shem Torah shebechtav and Torah shebal peh. That's the surrounding level, the smell, the godliness which is in the Torah. This is above the Torah as we have it here. It's above anything, the godliness. The upper will of God. Who would dream that that's what happens when you do a commandment, when you learn the Torah, that you're connected to the essence of God really at that time, not just in the afterworld. It's just that in this world, our body and our personality prevents us from feeling godliness. And when a person goes to heaven after he dies, so there's none of this, impairment of the body and the personality, so we can feel God, but all we feel is the little ray of godliness. But the will of God itself, it's not in the category of understanding. It's not in the bechin, it's not in the category of understanding at all. Ki'im, but rather, bechinas reach, it's a smell. Like it says, Gabi Korbanos reach nichoach, says that the sacrifices, they were a pleasing smell to God. So that's the whole idea of the journeys in the desert. By refining ourselves, we make these journeys in the desert, and there's temporary encampments that we make, because the whole point of the thing of these journeys is to make the final encampment. So the encampments, journeying through the desert and the encampments in the desert, that's only while we're in this world now, before Mashiach comes. But the final encampment, that's Yarden Yerecho, then it says that we'll really feel the essence of God. Other places it says Yarden from the language of Vayered miyam yam. It says the Mashiach will rule from one end of the world to the other. All the people in the world will just say, hey, we just want to serve God. And the only one who knows how to really do it is the Mashiach. So, let's see how to serve God. And the Mashiach is going to say, God is inside of you. You feel godliness. You want to honor that feeling, then you have to do the 7 Noahide commandments. That's called Yarech, the Yarden Yerid Miyam, he will rule. But here we're not talking about that so much. Here we're talking about Yerecho, the smell. It says we'll feel a little ray, a smell of what the commandments really are, what the Torah really is. when a person goes up to heaven, so he feels a little bit more of this feeling, but you can't do the commandments up there. You can't do them. You can get the biggest prizes you want to, but you can't do anything. In this world, it says that he wants the combination. You'll feel the godliness, the smell of the godliness in the world, and you'll also be able to do the commandments. Nichoach, that gives God a pleasure. Hu lashon nachot, it brings godliness down. Nichoach means it brings God down into the world. And darga mibechenes reach nimshach, this smell, so to speak, the ray of godliness will be drawn down. Liot chadasha gavoa meod, to be brand new, na'ala, high. Will realize how incredibly high every instant of this world is. La'atid lavo, in the future, Yidkala will be revealed. This level of ve'arecho birat Hashem. It says he will be smelled with the smell of God. It's the Mashiach. He will smell with the fear of God. He won't just judge according to what seems on the outside. The morach vadayim, that his smell is, he will certify things. It will, what do you say? He will, he will say, verify things by his smell. The Mashiach. This is also Yarden Yerecho, etc. I mean, this was definitely a quality of the Rebbe. Definitely a quality of the Rebbe. There was a story even that was told. There was a person in Chabad, very well-known person. I hope I don't forget his name. And his name was just slipped my mind. There's even a big building here that's called after him. Anyway, so he was very sort of friendly with the Rebbe. The Rebbe was very friendly with him. And it was, how could I forget his name? This is ridiculous. Okay, so the Rebbe came down. There's an elevator in 770, and the Rebbe came down from upstairs. He was doing something upstairs, and he came down, and he went out, and this chassid was standing outside of the the elevator. And the Rebbe turned to him and he said, "This morning you didn't say Ya'aleh V'yavo in your davening." And on Rosh Chodesh, in the beginning, the first day of the month, so when we pray, it's a bit longer prayers. And in the regular, normal prayer that we have, there's also an additional prayer, and we say Hallel. But in the regular Shmon Esrei, there's a little addition. It's called Ya'aleh V'yavo that we say. And the Rebbe turned to him and said, "You didn't say Ya'aleh V'yavo this morning." And he realized, wow, the Rebbe is right. And the Rebbe said to him, he smiled, and he said, "See, you made me use my Ruach HaKodesh for your foolishness." Something like that. Altais. Oh, Pinchas Altais was his name. He said, "You made me use my Ruach HaKodesh for your..." But the fact of the matter is that the Rebbe smelled somehow, I don't know what it was, but he knew that he didn't, obviously he wasn't listening, he didn't have any devices to hear and listen to everybody to see what he was exactly his 18%. He felt somehow or other that he had not. But and that's enough. Okay, so what do we learn? We learned that by means of fixing ourselves up and by means of thinking, contemplating God, Shema Yisrael, is that we can make the 42 journeys through this world. We can make 42 journeys in our lifetime. Each person is a little bit different. Maybe it's a lot different. But the goal of the whole business is to come to Yarden Yerecho. It's to come to the last stop, and that's Mashiach. And Mashiach, he will make the idea of smelling God, in other words, a sense which is above understanding, that'll be the common denominator in this world. That'll be common currency. That people will live with the feeling that God is the boss and we're not the boss, and we can't really understand it. But you have to remember, there's a very important commandment to use our mind as much as possible. We can't say, "Oh, so I just don't understand anything, so just live a life of just pure faith in the Lord." No, you have to, it's an obligation that you have to use your mind. You have to ask questions, you have to search for answers, you have to improve the world. Improving the world, you have to make inventions, like we said so many times before. That's why the Rebbe said to the scientists, that asked, is it okay to investigate if there's life on Mars? It says it's an obligation for a scientist to investigate, to know as much about the universe, physical, spiritual, as possible. But you have to understand, after all, that the whole business is just a big miracle, that God is creating everything all the time, and that we're doing it. It's God's world, it's not our world. As we'll talk about more, God willing, next week. Now there'll be a class tomorrow, but we'll do the Dvar Malchut. Here we go. Dvar Malchut. One minute. Excuse me 1 second.